The rain-slicked streets of Cadiz gleamed under the sodium lamps like veins pulsing with secrets, and that's when I first saw her, Miriam, leaning against the weathered stone wall of a tapas bar, her laughter cutting through the humid night like a siren's call. I was Evangeline then, just a wide-eyed American transplant, 25 and adrift, chasing the ghosts of a failed art career across the Atlantic to this sun-baked corner of Spain. One glance at her, those dark curls framing a face that held the warmth of Mediterranean summers, and I knew my world had tilted. But it wasn't until she turned, her brown eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that felt like fate's cruel joke, that I whispered to myself, this is how it ends, or begins. We collided that night in the chaos of the Feria del Caballo, the annual horse fair that turned the old city into a whirlwind of flamenco skirts and clinking glasses. I was nursing a glass of sherry, pretending to sketch the parade of riders in my battered notebook, when she slid onto the stool beside me. "You're drawing the horses wrong," she said, her voice a soft lilt laced with an Andalusian accent that wrapped around my heart like velvet. "They don't prance like that. They dance." I looked up, heat rising in my cheeks, and there she was, Miriam Khalil, 26, a half-Moroccan, half-Spanish translator who'd grown up between the spice markets of Tangier and the whitewashed alleys of Cadiz. She snatched my pencil with a grin that bared the slight gap between her front teeth, a flaw that only made her more achingly real, and redrew the lines with bold, sure strokes. Our hands brushed, and electricity hummed through me, the kind that makes you forget the language you're speaking. By midnight, we were stumbling through the labyrinthine streets, her arm linked in mine, the fair's distant trumpets fading into the lap of waves against the harbor. She told me about her life in fragments, the divorce of her parents when she was 12, splitting her summers between cultures, the freelance gigs translating poetry for obscure literary journals, the quiet ache of loving women in a town where whispers could curdle milk. "Spain's changing," she said, pausing to light a cigarette under a wrought iron balcony dripping with bougainvillea. "But some things, they still hide in the shadows." I confessed my own shadows then, fleeing a Manhattan gallery that had chewed up my abstract paintings and spat them out as derivative, the ex who left me for a man with a trust fund, the gnawing fear that I'd never create anything that mattered. She stubbed out her smoke and pulled me close, her lips tasting of salt and manzanilla wine. "Then paint me," she murmured against my mouth. "Make me matter." We ended up in her tiny apartment above a fishmonger's, the air thick with the scent of sea brine and jasmine from the windowsill. It was messy, lived in, books stacked like Jenga towers, a half-knitted scarf abandoned on the sofa. We didn't sleep. We talked until dawn painted the room in pinks and golds, her fingers tracing the freckles on my shoulders as if mapping constellations. She spoke of dreams, opening a bilingual bookstore that bridged worlds, hosting readings where queer voices from Gibraltar to Gibraltar could echo without fear. I sketched her in the half-light, capturing the curve of her collarbone, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. For the first time since landing in Spain 6 months prior, I felt anchored, like the Atlantic's pull had finally led me home. But anchors can drag you under. The next morning, as we shared café con leche on her balcony overlooking the cathedral spires, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from my mother back in Seattle. "Evie, honey, it's bad. Dad's had a stroke. Come home. Now." The words hit like a rogue wave. I hadn't spoken to my father in years, not since he disowned me after I came out at 19, his Bible-thumping silence louder than any sermon. Yet there it was, a tether yanking me back across the ocean. Miriam watched me crumble, her hand steady on mine. "Go," she said softly. "Family's messy, but it's yours." I promised I'd return in a week, 2 at most. We kissed goodbye at the train station, her tears salting my skin, my heart fracturing with every chug of the rails toward Madrid's airport. I vanished that day, not by choice, but by circumstance. The flight was delayed, then rerouted through a storm. By the time I landed in Seattle, Dad was in ICU, tubes snaking from his arms like accusations. Mom hovered like a ghost, her once vibrant red hair now streaked gray, blaming me in whispers for his stress, as if my queerness had clogged his arteries. Weeks blurred into months, hospital vigils, rehab sessions, the slow unraveling of our family's fragile peace. I tried to reach Miriam, texts bouncing back undelivered, calls dropping into voicemail voids. My cheap phone had died in the rain at the station, and in the panic, I'd left her number scrawled on a napkin in my abandoned suitcase. Spain felt like a fever dream, her touch a phantom ache. 3 years. That's how long the silence stretched. Dad recovered enough to walk, but not to forgive. He died a year later, leaving a will that disinherited me 4 lifestyle choices, funneling everything to my brother. Mom retreated into church ladies and denial. I clawed my way through community college night classes, waitressing by day, painting by the dim light of a single bulb. Rage fueled me, rage at the loss, at the betrayal, at the woman I'd left behind without a word. I channeled it into canvases, bold strokes of crimson and indigo, abstracts that screamed of fractured loves and stolen futures. A local gallery in Portland noticed, then a scout from New York. By 28, I was Evangeline Voss, the wunderkind of the Pacific Northwest art scene, my pieces hanging in Soho lofts and whispered about in Art Forum. Power came with it, galleries, agents, a sleek loft overlooking the Willamette. But power is a hollow crown when your heart's still buried in Andalusian soil. It started with an email. A curator from the Reina Sofia in Madrid inviting me to a retrospective, Evangeline Voss, Echoes of Exile. Irony bit deep, my work, born of that severed night in Cadiz, now courted by the very continent I'd fled. I booked the flight on impulse, telling myself it was business. But as the plane descended over Iberia, the coastline unfurling like an old love letter, I knew the lie. I needed to know if she'd waited. If she'd hated me. If the ghost of us still haunted those streets. Cadiz welcomed me back with a sirocco wind, hot and unforgiving, whipping my hair as I stepped from the taxi onto the Plaza de los Flores. The city hadn't changed much, the same flower stalls bursting with geraniums, the same elderly men arguing politics over dominoes. But I had. Strangers now nodded at my purposeful stride, mistaking the steel in my spine for confidence. My hotel overlooked the bay, rooms crisp with linen and the faint tang of ozone. That first evening, I wandered to the tapas bar where it began, ordering a sherry with hands that trembled. The bartender, older now, recognized nothing in my face. Good, I thought. Let the past stay buried. Fate, that meddlesome bitch, had other plans. The next day, at a pre-exhibit cocktail hour in a restored convent, I saw her. Miriam. Across the vaulted room, amid the murmur of critics and collectors, she stood in an emerald dress that hugged her curves like a promise kept. 29 now, her curls longer, streaked with subtle henna, but those eyes, God, those eyes, still held the depth of untamed seas. She was laughing at something a silver-haired gallerist said, her hand on his arm, easy and intimate. My stomach twisted, a cocktail of jealousy and longing. Had she moved on? Built the life she'd dreamed without me? Our gazes met over the rim of her wine glass, and the room narrowed to a pinpoint. She froze, color draining from her cheeks, then flushing hot. The gallerist excused himself, sensing the shift, and she crossed the floor like a storm gathering. Evangeline, she breathed, the name a wound and a balm. Up close, fine lines etched the corners of her mouth, laughter or sorrow, I couldn't tell. You're here. I am. My voice cracked, the polished veneer of the art world darling fracturing. Miriam, I don't. She held up a hand, manicured nails painted coral, the same shade I'd once smeared across her bedsheets in playful abandon. 3 years, Evie. 3 years of wondering if you were dead in a ditch or just too ashamed to say goodbye. The words landed like slaps, each one stinging truer than the last. Around us, conversations hummed on, oblivious, but in our bubble, the air crackled with unfinished symphonies. It wasn't like that, I whispered, stepping closer, the scent of her jasmine perfume pulling me under. My father. The stroke. I lost my phone, your number. I tried. Her laugh was bitter, a shard of glass. You vanished like smoke, leaving me to explain to friends why the American girl who'd promised forever ghosted after one perfect night. I waited, months. Sold that damn scarf I'd started knitting for you to fund the calls to embassies. And when nothing came, I picked up the pieces. Build my life without you. My throat tightened, the weight of her pain mirroring my own. What pieces? I asked, hating the desperation in my tone. She glanced away, toward the arched windows where twilight bled into the sea. The bookstore. La Puerta Entre Mundos, it's real now. Queer authors, poetry slams on Fridays. And Javier. The gallerist. He's kind. Steady. Javier. The name was a knife twist. You're happy. The question hung, fragile as sea glass. Her eyes returned to mine, stormy. I was learning to be. That night, I couldn't sleep. The hotel bed felt like a raft in turbulent waters, tossing me between memories and regrets. By dawn, I'd made my choice, I wouldn't slink away again. If claiming what was hers meant fighting for us, for the love we'd glimpsed in that stolen night, I'd wield every ounce of the power I'd forged in exile. But power blinds, and I didn't yet see the shadows it cast. The retrospective opened with a flourish, flashbulbs popping like gunfire, critics in tailored suits dissecting my canvases as if they held the secrets to the universe. Echoes of exile, swirling vortices of blue and gold, evoking the Strait of Gibraltar's restless currents, the ache of borders crossed and loves abandoned. I stood in a sheath of midnight silk, accepting compliments with a smile honed sharper than any scalpel, but my mind was adrift, snagged on Miriam. She'd come, of course, Javier at her side, his arm possessive around her waist as they mingled near the tapas spread. Every glance she stole my way felt like a current pulling me under. After the speeches, as the crowd thinned to intimate clusters, I cornered her in the convent's cloistered garden. Moonlight filtered through orange trees, casting dappled shadows on the flagstones. Javier had stepped away for a call, leaving us alone amid the rustle of leaves. We need to talk, I said, my voice low, urgent. Really talk. Miriam's posture stiffened, but she didn't retreat. Talk. Or conquer. I see you now, Evie, the prodigy, the phoenix risen. But I remember the girl who left without a map. I had no choice. The words tumbled out, raw and unvarnished. I told her everything, the sterile beep of hospital machines, Dad's labored breaths rasping accusations, Mom's veiled barbs about choices that broke families, the inheritance stripped away, forcing me to rebuild from ash. I wrote letters, I confessed, dozens, to the only address I could recall, your bookstore idea, scribbled on that napkin. They came back, undeliverable. I thought you'd moved on, forgotten. Her face softened, just a fraction, the moonlight carving hollows under her eyes. I didn't forget. How could I? That night. It was the first time someone saw me, not the translator or the bridge between worlds. You sketched my soul, Evie. She reached out, fingers brushing my wrist, and the touch ignited embers long banked. But life doesn't pause for ghosts. Javier reappeared then, his smile polite but edged, hand reclaiming her elbow. Everything all right, amour? The endearment twisted in my gut. Fine, she replied, pulling away gently. Just catching up with an old friend. As they melted into the night, I nursed a cognac in the emptying hall, the burn doing little to dull the jealousy gnawing at my ribs. Who was I to judge? I'd forfeited my claim. Yet the pull was magnetic, undeniable. The next morning, I found myself at La Puerta Entre Mundos, the bookstore she'd built from dreams. Tucked into a narrow calle near the market, its facade painted indigo with a rainbow arch over the door, a quiet rebellion in conservative Cadiz. Shelves groaned under volumes in Spanish, Arabic, English, Audre Lorde beside Federico Garcia Lorca, fat was on queer love interspersed with graphic novels of sapphic superheroes. The air smelled of fresh ink and cardamom tea. Miriam was behind the counter, ringing up a stack of zines for a gaggle of university students. She looked up, surprise flickering before resolve settled. Stalking now? Or just slumming it with the locals? Admiring, I said, genuine. It's beautiful. You did this, all of it. Pride lit her features, softening the guard. With help. Friends, loans, a lot of stubborn hope. She poured me a thimble of tea from a samovar, the steam curling like unspoken words. We talked then, halting at first, then freer, her battles with city permits that dragged for months, citing family-friendly concerns, the poetry night where a trans author drew protesters, only for locals to form a human chain of solidarity. I shared my assent, the cutthroat auctions where bids soared into six figures, the isolation of success that left me dining alone in high-rises. It's power, I admitted, but it's lonely. Like painting with one hand tied. Her gaze held mine, searching. And what do you want from this power, Evangeline Voss? To buy my forgiveness. My heart. The question pierced. To make it right. To see if there's still an us worth salvaging. She set down her cup, the porcelain clinking like a verdict. There's a reading tonight. Stay. See the world I built without you. I did. The shop transformed under strings of fairy lights, folding chairs crammed with a diverse crowd, fishermen with calloused hands clutching slim volumes, expat retirees with rainbow pins, young lovers stealing kisses in corners. Miriam emceed, her voice weaving magic, introducing a Moroccan poet on diaspora, a Spanish lesbian memoirist on hidden desires. When she read her own piece, a villanelle about a love lost to tempests, the room hushed. Waves reclaim what gulls have stolen / yet echoes linger in the foam's white sigh. My chest ached, it was us, distilled into verse. Afterward, over glasses of vermouth in the back room, the crowd dispersed, leaving us amid stacks of chapbooks. The air thickened, charged. That was for you, she whispered, our knees brushing under the table. Even when I hated you. I never stopped loving you. The confession slipped free, vulnerable as a sketch half-drawn. Her hand found mine, thumb tracing my knuckles, and the world narrowed to that touch, the same one that had unraveled me 3 years prior. We kissed there, tentative at first, then fervent, the taste of her like redemption, salt and spice and second chances. Javier's shadow loomed unspoken, but in that moment, it was just us, reclaiming the rhythm we'd lost. She led me upstairs to the loft above the shop, a space evolved from that messy apartment, now with woven rugs from Marrakesh and canvases I'd recognize anywhere, my style, but hers, bold abstracts of interlocking forms in ochre and teal. I kept painting, she said shyly, after you left. To remember. To rage. We made love slowly, reverently, bodies rediscovering paths long overgrown. No frenzy, just the quiet unfolding of souls, her breath hitching at my fingertips on her hip, my name a prayer on her lips. Dawn found us tangled in sheets, her head on my chest, the port's foghorns a distant lullaby. But paradise is fleeting in stories like ours. Javier called at noon, his voice tinny through the phone speaker. Miriam. Where are you? The supplier's here for the shipment. She stiffened in my arms, reality crashing in. I have to go, she murmured, dressing with hurried grace. That afternoon, as I prepped for a panel at the museum, doubt crept in. Was this a reclamation or a raid? My agent buzzed with news, a rival gallery in Barcelona sniffing around my contract, whispers of poaching. Play hardball, Evie. You're the prize. Power's siren song, always. Evening brought the betrayal's first fracture. At a seaside dinner with collectors, octopus grilled to charred perfection, Rioja flowing like blood, I spotted them, Miriam and Javier, arguing in low tones at a corner table. He was gesturing wildly, face flushed, she, head bowed, tears glistening. My fork paused mid-air. When he stormed out, she remained, staring into her paella like it held prophecies. I approached, heart hammering. Miriam. She looked up, eyes red-rimmed. He knows. About us. Saw your exhibit Instagram, us, together last night. A pause, heavy. He proposed last month. I said yes because. Stability. After you, I craved it. The world tilted. Proposed. The ring on her finger, a simple gold band with an emerald, glinted like accusation. And now. Now. She laughed, hollow. I don't know. You sweep in, this force of nature, claiming what's hers like I'm a painting to hang on your wall. But I'm not yours, Evie. Not anymore. Her words eviscerated, but the pain forged resolve. Then let me earn it. Stay. Fight for this, with me. She stood, chair scraping. Some fights leave scars you can't paint over. She walked away, into the twilight, leaving me amid the clatter of silverware and the sea's indifferent roar. The climax brewed that night in a storm of my own making. Fueled by Rioja and regret, I cornered Javier at his gallery the next day, a sleek space in the new quarter, walls lined with abstract nudes that screamed privilege. He was tall, patrician, with a jaw like carved marble. Evangeline Voss, he drawled, not bothering to rise from his desk. The prodigy returns. Here to poach my muse. Here to warn you, I shot back, voice steel. She's not a muse. She's a woman who deserves more than your safety nets. His laugh was urbane, cutting. And you? The absentee lover, back to play savior. Miriam told me everything, your vanishing act, the silence. I was there, piecing her back together. What have you got besides pretty pictures and a fat ego? The truth stung, but I leaned in. Love. The kind that doesn't settle. I slid a check across the desk, 6 figures, enough to fund her bookstore for years. Buy her freedom. Or lose her. He stared, then tore it in half, pieces fluttering like confetti. Get out. Before I call security, and tell the press about the heartbroken hack who faked her exile for drama. Humiliation burned, but as I fled into the rain-lashed streets, clarity struck. Power wasn't in checks or canvases, it was in vulnerability, in mending what I'd broken. The storm broke over Cadiz like divine wrath, sheets of rain hammering the terracotta roofs, turning gutters into rivers of regret. I holed up in my hotel, sketches scattering the desk, frantic lines capturing Miriam's profile, Javier's sneer, my own fractured reflection. The exhibit's final day loomed, a gala auction where my largest piece, Strait's Lament, a massive triptych of entwined figures against roiling seas, would headline. Bids were already whispering into the millions, but the money felt tainted, a crown of fool's gold. Miriam came to me at midnight, pounding on the door like a supplicant or a fury. Soaked through, her dress clinging translucent, curls plastered to her neck. You bribed him, she accused, shoving past me into the room. That check, do you know what it felt like? Like I was for sale. I closed the door, the click echoing. It was desperation. To give you options. He tore it up. Good. She paced, water pooling at her feet, a tempest in human form. Because I don't need your money, Evie. I need truth. Why now? Why me? I sank onto the bed, the fight draining. Because losing you the first time hollowed me out. Every success since, it's been chasing that night, that feeling of whole. You're not a prize, you're my north. And I know I wrecked us, but if there's a fragment left. She stopped, facing the window where lightning forked the bay. Thunder rumbled, syncing with my pulse. Fragments cut. Javier. He's safe, yes. But safe isn't love. It's survival. Turning, her eyes brimmed. That proposal. It was my armor. After you, I armored up. Built walls higher than the city gates. Then let me help tear them down. I stood, closing the distance, hands hovering before cupping her face, cold, tear-streaked. Not as the powerful woman. As Evangeline. The one who fell for a translator with a gap-toothed smile and dreams big as the Atlantic. Our kiss was salt and storm, desperate, her fingers twisting in my hair as if to anchor against the gale. We collapsed onto the bed, shedding wet clothes like old skins, bodies pressing with the urgency of second chances. It was emotional cartography, mapping scars, tracing the years apart in whispers and sighs. Her skin against mine felt like homecoming, every curve of verse I'd memorized and forgotten. No conquest, just communion, her laughter muffled against my shoulder, my promises breathed into her ear. I'll stay, I vowed. Build with you. Translate your world into mine. Dawn crept in, gray and forgiving, finding us entwined, the rain a soft patter now. She traced my collarbone, voice sleepy. The auction tonight. Will you sell it? Straight's lament. It's us, I murmured. The pull, the pain, the return. But if it goes, we'll make a new one. Together. The gala was a whirlwind, chandeliers dripping light over black ties and gowns, the air humming with avarice. Javier lurked at the edges, his gaze a cold appraisal, but Miriam was my talisman, beside me in a borrowed shawl of midnight lace, her presence a quiet claim. As the auctioneer called the triptych, bids climbed like vines, 500,000, then 1,000,000, voices overlapping in frenzy. My agent squeezed my hand, eyes alight with commissioned dreams. At 2,000,000, a phone bid from New York, anonymous, relentless. The room held its breath. Miriam leaned in, her whisper hot against my ear, let it go. Or keep it. Your call. 3,000,000. The gavel hovered. In that suspended heartbeat, I saw it all, the power I'd wielded like a weapon, the betrayal of absence, the humanistic truth that love isn't claimed, it's chosen, daily, with grace. I raised my paddle, not to bid, but to halt. Withdraw it, I told the auctioneer, voice steady amid the gasps. It's not for sale. Chaos erupted, muttered outrage from collectors, my agent's horrified stare, but Miriam smiled, fierce and free, her hand finding mine under the table. Javier slipped out early, his exit a silent concession. In the aftermath, over churros and chocolate at a dawn market stall, we plotted. I'd extend my visa, sublet the loft in Portland, she'd carve space in the loft for a studio, our brushes mingling on shared canvases. The bookstore would host joint exhibits, Voss and Khalil, Bridges Unburned. No grand gestures, just the quiet heroism of showing up, for poetry nights rain or shine, for family holidays where mom's calls from Seattle grew less barbed, for the inevitable clashes when cultures clashed or egos flared. Betrayal's shadow lingered, Javier's curt email severing ties, a tabloid whisper of art world drama, but it humanized us, reminded that perfection is a myth. We weren't saviors or conquerors, we were women, flawed and fierce, stitching a tapestry from threads of loss. Months later, on that same cliffside near Tarifa where winds whisper of crossings, we stood at dusk, me sketching the horizon, her reading aloud from a dog-eared Lorca. The Atlantic crashed below, eternal and unyielding, but our hands clasped bridged the straits. After one night, you disappeared, she teased, echoing the title of my unsold masterpiece, now hanging in our loft. But you came back. Claiming nothing, I replied, pulling her close. Just us. And in that humanistic grace, the drama of return yielding to the romance of renewal, we found our ever after, not flawless, but achingly, beautifully ours.